shortest possible introduction, I think, because the subject is what is left, how to think left. Subject is a little bit difficult and crazy. As far as I can tell, this is the only place in the program where you have not program, but you will have it very soon, where left is not capitalized. That means in the rationale of this summer school offered to Center for Advanced Studies by Felix Henkel, that is the Friedrich Hebert Stiftung, for which I would like to thank him in the name of the two institutions I am the head of. Henkel sent a plan for this on February 10th entitled The Democratic Left. We have further the words in this rationale in the singular and plural protest activist forum Southeast region, as well as academics and platform. The German foundation, which belongs to the center, although perhaps more the left than right center, seems to me to have two intentions. First, to connect activists of this region with the academic institution or institutions in order to form a platform or a clear text that could reconstruct the academy and give activism shape. And second, to attempt to carefully and delicately offer direction to the left and quote one of the historical tasks. The task of the left in the present period is to help hold the center. This is a quote. I will tell you who will be author of this quote. The poster for this conference features a stylized word, consolidation, which also features in the rationale. The star, as you remember here, blue and either still not or no longer red, is a symbol that usually indicates a centering or assembling of various movements or prongs into common central complex. Depending on how you look at it or how we look at it, these are, for example, Norberto Bobbio's what criteria of distinction between left and right. This star could be five-sided, almost, or as if one moment it is consolidating and assembling or self-regulating, and the next it is dissolving. This little visual game does not have to be accidental. It is indeed sometimes said that the left or right is entirely, I quote, an issue of perception. In French, une affaire de perception, or perhaps perspective. Before I uncover a few points that hold my introduction together and suggest a combination of three moments that concern the left and how to think left, here are a few words about the title. The title, as you see, is New Left of this conference, also suggested by the Foundation. This frivolous and retro phrase, and nothing but illusion. If the left usually refers to the ideal or utopian, to workers, work, solidarity, change, revolution, equality, alternative institutions, social justice, or public ownership, the new left is a label of an era. The period between 1960 and, let us say, 1980. It was a time when academics became very active in constructing or inventing something very just. New Left covers the renaissance of Marxism, Marcuse, Bloch, Trotskyist, anti-war movement, the hippies, 1968, you can say praxis philosophy, etc. Thinkers of the New Left, as you know, is the title of Roger Scruton's book published in 1985. 30 years later, he would publish Fools, Frauds, and Firebrands. And interesting, this year, 85, is very interesting year in England, which was one of the reasons the book was written. It was that year that Oxford University voted overwhelmingly to refuse to confer an honorary doctorate on the Prime Minister who was an alumna. Margaret Thatcher studied chemistry there, and a few years ago, the current secretary, as you know, Johnson, suggested this doctorate be conferred posthumously, rectifying the grave injustice. Scruton is a good reader who does something rarely still done on the left, and which be my first characteristic of left, still lowercase left. Left, I think, is concerned with abolishing illusions, destroying hypocrisy, and loathing of masks, of falsity, manipulation, bluff, and some kind of fickle character. When Marat, revolutionnaire, launches the revolutionary journal L'Ami du Peuple in 1789, he meticulously follows those who spread illusions. And for him, illusions is very short. L'illusion est de courte durée. Scruton calls the new leftist fanatics radical lefting nonsense factory, and in 1985 classifies them in an interesting way. That means for him, new left or thinkers of the new left are Ronald Dworkin, Raymond Williams, Foucault, Gramsci, Habermas, Althusser, etc. There is an interesting Marxist group at that time with Jerry Cohen and Elster calling himself non-bullshit Marxist group. In 2015, however, his position is that the left has mostly become a Slovene-French thing. That means in 85 you have mixed of different thinkers, but in the new book of Scruton you have this Slovene-French thing. If you, I must now quote one Slovene guy, you know who is this, during the elections in United States, he said, yes, that's my provocative thesis, that if you scrap this ridiculous and, I admit it, dangerous surface, he is, that means Trump, he is a much more opportunist candidate, and his actual politics perhaps will not be so bad. In the same time, that means just after the election, the other man, the other guy who is one of the honorary fellows of Center for Advanced Studies, Michael Walzer, wrote the text that was in January 2017, the historical tasks or historical task of the left in the present period. In this text, Walzer wrote, I have friends who are ready to put their bodies between the police and the first immigrant they try to arrest. All of us are planning to register as Muslims if there ever is a Muslim registry. Theory is hard, but the practical political work of the next few years is all too obvious. It is the defensive version of standard left activism. We have to defend what's left of the gains of post-Second World War social democracy. The right-wing attack is extraordinarily ambitious against immigrants, unions, public schools, healthcare, welfare generally, and the still inadequate constraints on environmental damage. In resisting these attacks, we obviously need to join any coalition that offers some chance of success. Again, Walzer, some of our comrades want to find this congenial work. I have friends who had to hold their noses to vote for Hillary Clinton, and a few who could not stand the stink and refused to vote for her. But I have a wiser friend who explained why he found the vote easy. He said, "Don't think of your own scruples. Think of the welfare of the most vulnerable people in this country, and then vote gladly for the candidate who minimalizes their vulnerability." That maxim should guide our politics today. What the most vulnerable people need right now is the protection afforded by a strong constitutionalism, the defense of civil liberties and civil rights in the name of the Constitution. This is a centrist politics. So, whenever else we do, we have to work with other Americans to rebuild what Arthur Schlesinger years ago called the vital center. Who is left and who right? Who the real? Who the false revolutionary? Who is the real traitor? These are all implicitly part of another left activity, since the left is necessarily a matter of group, of the minority, the very few who announce the large and the world. Let us recall Korach and his band. You can find this in Numbers, at the beginning of the book Numbers. The first leftists in the history of humanity, this is what Walzer calls him, who struggles against Moses and Aaron's privileges. It seems that his insistence on the equality of all hides a new privilege. It turned out that Korach started from himself, works for himself and his band. I quote, "To be from the left is the opposite. In French, être de gauche, c'est l'inverse." This is the second characteristic best reconstructed by one who connects the left not with morality, but with perception. His name, as you know, is Gilles Deleuze. In Deleuze, I hope that you remember this episode, what is to be from the left. I quote him, "We start by us, and as we are privileged, we live in a rich country, we wonder how we can do to sustain in time this situation. We can feel that there are some dangers, that this situation can't last too long. So we say, oh, but the Chinese are so far away. How can we do so that Europe can sustain itself in time, etc., etc.? To be from the left is the opposite, is to perceive, as it is said, that Japanese people perceive. They do not perceive like us. They primarily perceive the perimeter. They would say the world, the continent Europe, France, etc., etc., this street, and me. It is phenomenon of perception. This way we first perceive the horizon. Again, Deleuze, this is not a problem of moral, that's a problem of perception. If we start by the whole, that is to be from the left. It means that we can call and consider that those issues are the one to be solved. And that does not mean at all that we should say that we should diminish birth rate, etc., because saying that it is just another way to conserve Europe's privileges. This is not it. It's really about finding the worldwide arrangements that will solve those issues. In fact, to be from the left, it is to know that the third world's issues are closer from us than our neighborhood's issues. It is really a problem of perception. It is not a problem of beautiful soul. That is mainly what is it to be from the left for me. Foremost is the world, the horizon, the right of all and justice for all, and not I, my group and my neighborhood. Although individual and group actions are always also necessary and simultaneous. The justification of this conference is a constant defense of the connection between, on the one hand, activists, small groups, and, on the other, the horizon and the world. Academics ought to be bearers of this option, Scruton notwithstanding. This question was initiated in a small question from 1953 film, The Wild One. Last year, Joe Wolf, friend and board member of Center for Advanced Studies, wrote a column in The Guardian in which he insisted that academics, I quote, that academics must reply to the Marlon Brando crew, and that, I quote Wolf, both politics and academia will suffer unless we can create a new form of constructive engagement. Here is the scene to which he is referring. Please. Sorry. Starting with a character named Mildred. Somebody, she said, somebody tell me what that means. BRMC. What does that mean? And Boxer replies, Black Rebels Motorcycle Club. Then Mildred, oh, that's cute. What are you rebelling against? What are you rebelling against, Johnny? Johnny gives her a quick, stony look. What have you got? Later in a scene, Mildred repeats again. Hi, Kathy. Aren't they wonderful? Did you hear what I said? I said, what does that mean? BRMC. And he said, the Black Rebels Motorcycle Club. And I said, what are you rebelling against, Johnny? And Johnny said, what have you got? What have you got? Isn't that cute? The first characteristic of this protocol of the left is certainly engagement. This is what Johnny has, but it also at once aware of the need for an addition when he asks Mildred for a platform, a construction or constructive engagement or consistent line of activity. Paraphrasing Sartre, war, I quote, war has taught me, all of us, that we must be engaged. The war teaches commitment and engagement. Before I simply list a few regulative ideas that ought to tie engagement that mention Joe Wolf to the left, let me thank Gazela Pudar, who is the real organizer of this conference and who, along with me, is one of the founders of the Group for Social Engagement Studies at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory in Belgrade. Engagement ought to defeat, first of all, disengagement, so désengagé, always simultaneously present in any engagement or commitment. Johnny, as you saw, Johnny is ready to give up at any point, which is proof that he is engaged. A lover is ever ready to give up because he does indeed love. Engagement also refers not only to one's own group, for example, a football supporters group or political party, for example, but necessarily surpasses it. Engagement means calling not only those who belong to a group but are not present, something also inherent to the protocol of populism, but all those who are not present regardless of group, who only then become the group. In that sense, engagement is public and transparent and necessarily concerns all. Engagement is not entertainment and does not cease when the task is completed and when one has been remunerated. In order to be synonymous with the left, engagement can have no end, and vice versa. Thank you.